Hello all and welcome, and I am the Realist Philosopher, and today I'd like to talk about the diversity is good mantra and why it is anything but. Now, the mantra of those on the left and even some on the right is that diversity is good, it makes us better as a culture and as human beings. This is mindless babble, right? I mean, what does that mean anyway? Diversity makes us better. Why? Why does it make us better? Is there an argument there rationalizing this belief, this claim? No, because it's all based on feels, not rationale or reason, right? Of course, there is some nonsense out there about how introducing different cultures together and mixing them up will somehow enrich us all. But that's not an argument. That's a claim in need of an argument. That's just hippy-dippy nonsense, right? Now, sure, some types of diversification are a good thing, right? Like having a diverse portfolio. That's a good idea. And diverse interests. That's also not a bad idea. But, you know, the idea of diversity, it's not a universal good. Nor does it mean that automatically mixing things together, diverse things, is a good thing, right? I mean, taking oil and water and attempting to mix them together, well, that's all well and good until you see that they don't mix, right? You see, trying to represent cultures as things that are always compatible and then tossing them into a big bowl when you don't know how they're going to interact with each other, that's kind of akin to going into a chemistry lab and tossing random chemicals into a bowl willy-nilly and chanting, "Diversity is our strength," as you wait for what you expect to happen, but generally speaking, if you do things in that way, you're not going to get what you expected. Not even close. And what the heck does that mean anyway? Diversity is a strength. Why? Why is it a strength? Again, no argument, just feel-good words meant to virtue signal, but to explain nothing. For, you see, there is no explanation because none of it makes any sense in the first place, right? And of course, the implication is that America is racist. It's sexist. And it's always been this way. So we need to bring in people to break up the evil white man's monopoly on power and to spread around his ill-gotten wealth, right? Yeah, right. Basically, this whole call for diversity, it's nothing more than a big money grab to steal the wealth from the most productive people in Western society and then give it to a bunch of poor, useful idiots who will then vote the way the global elites want. Yes, and who are they stealing it from specifically? Well, white people, namely white men, which is why white men are constantly cast in such a negative light. They're simply doing too well. So, in the eyes of the poor, oppressed, black and brown man, it must be some kind of rigged game, right? At least that's what they're told to justify stealing their wealth. Hence, displace the white man and replace him with the oppressed people, who, by the way, are very easy to control by giving them the white man's money, right? Yes, poor and oppressed people who just happen to be black and brown. Yeah. Amazing how it's never white people who are poor and oppressed and not doing very well. Yeah, because we whites, we have such an unfair advantage, right? Go tell that to the white people living in the Appalachian Mountains. You know, the ones that live in mobile homes and shacks made of tin, tin metal, and, you know, living in their old log cabins that they cut by hand and are made of actual logs. Go tell them that. These people who are making moonshine and hunting squirrels to stay alive, right? Yeah, that's some privilege that those people have. Anyways, the mantra that diversity is our strength, it's just that. It's a mantra with no meaning. It makes no sense. It's just something this current generation of NPC types like to spout because they've been programmed to do so. That's it. I mean, think about it. Why on earth would introducing people into the same environment from cultures that, in some instances, are 1,000 years or more apart make anything better? Why? Why would anyone think that anything good would come from that? Why would anyone think that that's not trying to mix oil and water? Why would anyone think that cultures that treat women as chattel, where 80% of men marry their first cousins, where their kids are oftentimes seen as good delivery systems for bombs, why would any Westerner think that's compatible with Western values? How does that enrich us in the West? Could somebody please tell me that? Especially when those bombs that they send their kids out with, strapped to their chest, are so often meant to kill us white people. How does that enrich us exactly? And how does it enrich the West to have people coming to our countries from places where half the population has AIDS? How is that in any way, shape, or form enriching? Makes us poorer because they need a lot of health care, I know that. And how does it enrich us to have people coming from countries with no stable governments and no respect for law and order, and who can't even make their own home countries work? Because the truth of the matter is, wherever you go, there you are. And moving won't fix you, and you bring your problems with you. So these people bring their dysfunction with them into your society. Okay? And how does it help the West when the majority of these people are socialists? Or they will advocate for socialism once they get into your country. People who can't really compete in the Western job market, as many of them either don't know the language, or in most cases, they don't even have marketable skills. How does that help us in the West? Except to displace our own low-skill workers and, in addition, drain dry our welfare system. And how does it enrich us to have people living next door to us who believe in honor killings, death or apostates, blasphemy, who believe in magic, who believe that the body parts of albinos bring them magical powers? How does that help us? How does it help us exactly to have people like that living next door, huh? How are these things good for us in the West? How is it good to import people who hate us and want us to die because we don't believe what they do? Or, God forbid, because you're an albino, okay? What do we want? What do we want in the West? A return to the days of the Inquisition? Apparently we do. Do we want people hunting albinos and then cutting them up and selling their body parts on the black market and keeping other body parts as souvenirs or charms? Apparently we do. Apparently we want that. My point is this. The whole diversity is a strength mantra is ludicrous. And it's the kind of nonsense that could only be mumbled by someone who has never done any actual thinking about why this is true. Because if they did, they would find out that it's nonsense and there is no argument of any kind to back it up. Yes, sure, sometimes diversity can be a strength. It depends on the situation. For example, when people with diverse opinions get together to solve problems, solutions may be presented by those that don't think like everyone else, that those people who are in the majority, who are doing most of the problem solving the majority of the time, may have never come up with. Sure, so the injection of diverse ways of thinking, diverse ways of seeing things can help in a situation like that. However, that's not what those who put forward the so-called diversity doctrine teach. Oh no, they teach quite the opposite. You see, they put forward the idea that people have different ideas and they have different views of the world. So if you're the majority, that means you're privileged. So you need to shut up and do your best not to offend the minority, and also let them speak in your stead, because up until this point, you've always been a majority, you've always had a voice, so now it's time for you to have no voice, just like they used to have no voice, and let them have a voice while you shut your mouth. In this way, diversity is used to silence opposition of said diversity and the opinions of the current majority. Hence, to usher in the tyranny of the minority. This is done with the sole purpose, by the way, of ending all diversity, and I'll get to that in a sec. So think about it. What's going to happen once the majority of Americans and Europeans are no longer white? What do you think the minorities in Europe, who are mostly Muslims, will do to the whites there? What do you think Latinos will do to whites and then blacks after they're finished with whites? Because Latinos are very quickly overtaking blacks as the dominant minority in America. Very soon, they'll be the dominant members of the population. Very soon, they will be the majority, outnumbering white people. What's going to happen to whites and blacks then in America? Well, first off, they'll take over via the vote. And unlike white people, Muslims and Latinos and even blacks, they're very loyal to their own ethnic group. So how's it going to progress from there? Well, Muslim politicians are already getting elected in America simply for being Muslim. Great. Then, as this minority population of Muslims and Latinos slowly grows, they'll gain ever more power. Meanwhile, during this transitional period, whites will continue to be fed the same narrative about how they shouldn't breed because the planet is overpopulated. Meanwhile, they're getting displaced by people who are having 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. Finally, whites will be the minority, and those few that remain will eventually die out, right? or they'll be bred out of existence, like the Neanderthals. Essentially, white Europeans will cease to exist. Meanwhile, the globalists, well, all this time they'll have been working through their useful idiot pawns on the left to set up a borderless super government with one currency and no borders. Basically similar to the EU, only global. Sure, some countries will hold out, but for how long? And yeah, it'll take a while, but not as long as you might think. After all, when one country invades another, the goal is to take over, right? And if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that you can't have competing ethnic or religious groups occupying the same land. One always wins, and usually it's the one with the stronger will to win. Heck, the West isn't even fighting back. Oh no, they're inviting the enemy in with open arms. Come on in, invade, change my country. This is why countries have borders and standing armies in the first place, to stop this from happening. That's how you maintain real diversity. Real diversity comes in the form of cultures that can only exist in their own countries with their own borders. That's why you don't see countries like Japan throwing open their gates to the outside. Sure, come on in, change our culture and way of life. They get it, and they're proud to be Japanese. It's too bad the Romans didn't get it. Yeah, they threw open their gates to the barbarians and welcomed them in. Sure, come on in, barbarian hordes. Take what you want. We're weak, spineless jellyfish. We won't fight you. Oh, no. Come on in and take over. All us white people are so evil and corrupt. Yeah, we're not coming to your country and demanding that you give us free stuff and demanding that you let us have a voice in your government. And we're not coming into your country and taking over, but we're the evil ones. Come on in and displace us. We're inviting you. Take all that we have. We'll just give it to you. You won't even have to fight us for it. And as with the Romans, most of us in the West, well, we don't get it either. Hence, all you'll get by swamping Western countries with people from the third world is less countries of the first world, and in their place, extensions of the third, which, by the way, were created by those people who are fleeing from those third world hellholes in the first place. And those third world hellholes, well, they'll be recreated, remade anew in your Western backyard. Because wherever you go, there you are. You can't flee you, and you can't flee the dysfunction and the problems that you create in your environment. In closing, the globalists, they hate diversity. They hate it. It's their enemy, not their friend. All of this cultural diversity nonsense, it's not actual diversity. It's destruction. Real diversity maintains borders, maintains nations, and in turn, a country's culture. Once you start mixing cultures together, all you're going to get is some kind of homogeneous blob that little resembles its constituent parts. This may be a good thing, but it's unlikely given what we do know about some of the parts that are going into that mix in the first place, right? Cultures, after all, are not equal, and some of them are downright bad. Diversity is not a universal good, and in terms of culture, it never has been. If people enter another country in numbers too large for assimilation to occur, they'll very quickly displace the native population and change that culture to their own culture, or reduce the native population to a point of irrelevance. We have too many historical examples of this happening not to know it to be true. Cultural diversity is, in truth, the end of culture as a plurality, in favor of one superculture that takes the place of all the rest and utterly destroys any real diversity that now exists in the world in terms of culture. And that's the goal of the global elites, the destruction of the plurality of culture. I am the Realist Philosopher, and I wish you well. Take care.